Welcome to the Fierce Kind Mama of Multiples podcast. This podcast is for anyone raising multiples, twins, triplets, or more. I speak to inspiring parents of multiples who have healed from unexpected pregnancies and birthing experiences and who candidly share the highs and lows of raising multiples. I also speak to the professionals that work with multiple birth families. Together, we cover the practicalities of raising more than one baby at a time, as well as enhancing the emotional well-being of caregivers and children alike. Come join us as we laugh, cry, and share our personal and professional wisdom on all things multiples. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Kvetsa, and I am a fierce, kind mama of multiples. Welcome to the season finale. I can't believe that season 1 is coming to a close. I've had so much fun interviewing all the amazing guests that I've had this season, and I think now it's about time for a well-deserved break. So I hope this isn't going to be too disappointing for listeners, but today you're going to have just me, because what I thought we'd do for this episode, I thought it would be a good idea to take stock of where we've been this season and to give you some details about where things are heading. In other words, I thought it'd be nice to reflect and highlight some of the themes and issues that were raised in the first season, as well as let you know about some of the exciting things that I have lined up for season 2. I'm actually about to go on an overseas trip with my children to visit my family, and I haven't seen my family since before COVID. Now, probably some of you can relate to this. It's really hard living away from family, particularly as parents age and need more support. But as anyone who has young children knows, it's also really hard to travel with young kids, particularly on those long-haul flights where no one gets a decent sleep and it takes days to recover from jet lag. I mean, it's hard enough on the adults, let alone the kids. I've only actually ever taken my kids on a plane once before, and I won't lie, it wasn't easy. I remember thinking, I won't be doing this anytime again soon. After that experience, I remember actually the airlines not letting us take the double pram up to the gate. So there we were, with all our carry-on, 2 3-year-olds, trying to make our way to connecting flights in busy airports, kids being absolutely exhausted. At one point, they had decided they had had enough, and they just refused to walk, basically stopped in the middle of the airport crying. By the time we convinced them, we had to go through customs, we had to get our luggage, our suitcases. They had decided it was a good time to run around and start chasing one another. And inevitably, we got a lot of stares and unfortunately, not a lot of sympathy. Actually, I remember one woman coming up to me after we finally made it out of the airport and we were waiting for a taxi, and she said, "Oh, you probably need a stiff drink after that performance." And, it's funny now when I think about it, but I couldn't actually really tell at the time if she was trying to be encouraging or if she was simply being judgmental. So putting all that aside, now that the kids are older and overseas travel is back on the cards in terms of COVID and all of that, we are embarking on our trip to Canada to connect with my family again. And I'm really looking forward to that part of it. And I'm sure that I will have many stories to tell upon my return. Whether they're all positive, we'll just have to wait and see. But this upcoming trip, why I'm sharing this with you is because it makes me reflect on the many challenges of having multiples. Like even the positive experiences or memories that we try to create can sometimes feel heavy and difficult, and they aren't always what we expected. And I think that this is one of the themes that was really highlighted, particularly in the first episode of the season with perinatal psychologist Caitlin Sopp, where she spoke about how when she wanted to become a mom And everyone around her was telling her, oh, what a great mom she'd be, because she works with other moms. Like, this is exactly what she'd wanted. However, she didn't anticipate twins. And, when she wanted to fall pregnant and become a mom, she didn't anticipate having more than one baby. And not only that, but, she wasn't anticipating premature babies or a NICU stay, which is sadly a common reality for many multiple birth families. So if a parent such as Caitlin, a perinatal psychologist with years of training in supporting other mothers, can still feel overwhelmed with caring for more than one baby, what does that mean for the rest of us? What does that tell us about the demands of raising multiple babies? It's tough, right? Like, many families, even the ones who least expect to, struggle with the demands. If you are in the thick of it right now with 1, 2, 3, or more babies, please know, even the most trained professionals struggle. It doesn't say anything about your capacity or worthiness as a mother. It's simply the reality of looking after multiples. And I think it's something no one can really understand or appreciate until they've lived it and experienced it for themselves. I think episode 7 with Chantel Morrissey and episode 9 with Mandy Hose highlights this point really well, in that both Chantel and Mandy had the experience of a singleton pregnancy as well as a multiple birth pregnancy. And both described their multiple birth pregnancy as being far more complicated and difficult than their singleton pregnancies. In fact, Mandy spoke about not even realizing the emotional struggle she was experiencing following the birth of her twins, like not even realizing that that was actually related to her suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Her birth was traumatic, and sadly, many multiple births are. But as Caitlin Sopp said, we're expected to hit the ground running when we bring our babies home. And it's often not until much later that we realize, hang on, I've actually been through something quite difficult that hasn't been acknowledged or recognized. I might need some time to process this and acknowledge and discuss the difficulties that I'm having. In fact, I think many women don't even realize there's a problem or that they've been through something traumatic until much later, if at all. Instead, I think what happens is they might think there's something wrong with them. Like they just need to work harder, focus more on the kids. It'll get better when the kids start school or when they start doing more for themselves. And while I agree, there's nothing quite like the early months when you bring those babies home and the crying never seems to stop and you're so tired, but simply trying to do more and beating yourself up for not being able to do all the things you did before you brought more than one baby home, that just compounds the difficulties that many mothers face, and it really prevents them from healing. And one strategy is for us to find services and seek out help when we bring the babies home. Okay, that's one strategy. But another strategy might actually be to emotionally prepare for what's to come before the babies come home, before you even give birth. I'm a big advocate for preventative health care, and I strongly believe that we can prevent mental health problems, particularly in mothers, if they're given the right support. Not always, but there's still maybe times when women do experience postnatal depression after that might not have been foreseen or preventable because there were other things that happened. But I do think for the most part, we can focus more on preventative health care for mothers. So if you are interested in this, stick around because I have an important announcement at the end of the episode that I'd like to share with you. Hi there, fierce kind mama. Are you expecting multiples and wondering how you're going to cope when the babies arrive? Or do you already have multiples at home and wonder, will this ever get easier? First of all, let me say loud and clear, I get it. Feeling overwhelmed in motherhood is really common, and us mothers of multiples are particularly prone to feeling sometimes like it's all too much. I know for myself that becoming a first-time mother to twins at the age of 40 was a huge adjustment physically and psychologically. So I've taken my years of training in mental health and my experience coaching mothers of multiples, and put together a guide with my 5 top tips for overcoming overwhelm as a multiple birth parent. This guide is free, of course, and it doesn't matter what age multiples you have. You may be pregnant, or your multiples might have already left home. The principles apply to all parents of multiples, and because I know you're short on time, I've broken down the tips into easy-to-read chunks that you can begin implementing straight away. You can get your free copy now by signing up at my website, fiercekindmama.com. In Season 1, we also spent some time talking about the importance of looking after our physical and mental health through proper nutrition and exercise. So twin mom and fitness nutrition coach Danny Duncan, she spoke about the benefits of physical activity, even when we're pregnant with multiples. And twin mom and therapeutic horticulture practitioner Christy Howard, she spoke about the many benefits of adequate nutrition for us and for our children. And I remember that after I brought my babies home and my partner went back to work, I remember my meals, they were pretty ordinary. I hardly had any time to cook or prepare something nutritious. So it often meant that I was eating things like, a slice of bread with some peanut butter for lunch, and that's it. It's not that that's bad, but while you're trying to establish breastfeeding and getting your milk supply up and even just having enough energy to fuel yourself for the long day of looking after your babies, it's probably not an adequate way to eat. I was lucky, though, in some ways that I went on maternity leave early because of the pregnancy-related risks and the potential for a premature birth. So before my babies arrived, I actually spent a few days batch cooking. And I remember we bought this, big, large freezer, and I stockpiled it full of food. I basically cooked enough meals for 2 months. We had 2 months worth of dinners stockpiled in the freezer. Because without any outside supports, I knew that we'd be busy and tired, and that the last thing we wanted to worry about was what we were going to eat for dinner. But, once my partner returned to work, I started to neglect my nutrition somewhat, even though arguably I should have been paying much more attention to that, as I said before, since I was trying to up my milk supply. And it wasn't surprising to find out when my boys were about a year old that I was actually operating the whole time with an iron deficiency. And I remember at that point I'd gone back to work and I was so tired all of the time. And my colleagues even commented on how tired I looked. And everyone, including myself, just chalked it up to parenting. It's normal to be sleep deprived. Plus, I was, on the topic of fitness, I was trying to maintain some level of fitness. So I was waking up at 5 a.m. to try to fit in some exercise. So that's what I thought. I thought, I'm working, I'm getting up early, I'm doing all this stuff with the kids. It makes sense that I'm tired. Had I actually placed much more importance on making sure I was being properly and adequately nourished and not just focusing on my baby's nutritional needs, I had spent so much energy and time making sure that they were getting good, healthy meals and that I was introducing solids in an appropriate way and that I spent a lot of time thinking about them and what they needed. Had I placed a little bit more time and energy on making sure I was also getting good nutrition, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have been as tired. Maybe I wouldn't have found that first year and that return to work so difficult. But that's the thing, right? Hindsight is 20/20, and you don't know what you don't know. So now I'm trying to learn as much as I can about what it means to raise multiples and to share that knowledge with you. And that brings me to another major theme of this first season. And that's the fact that I spoke to a lot of professionals who work with multiple birth families. I was privileged to have met the wonderful Dr. Joan Friedman, Dr. John Maskazine, and Dr. Pat Preedy. And each of these professionals shared some really important insights into raising multiples. Joan spoke about her own experience as an identical twin, as a mother to fraternal twins, and as a psychotherapist who predominantly treats twinship issues. What I really loved about that episode was that there was some really simple things she suggested that we can be doing right from the start to help our multiples develop into emotionally healthy individuals and to circumvent some of the problems that can arise when multiples share everything from birth, including their parents' love and affection. So if you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to listen to that episode. And if you have school-age multiples, or you're starting to think about classroom placement issues, like should we have our multiples in separate classes or not, then you're going to get so much out of listening to the episodes with Dr. John Mascazine and Dr. Pat Preedy. Both of them are teachers and researchers. They've done a lot to not only study how multiples learn and fare in school, but they are also committed to sharing their knowledge with families and the kids themselves in order to ultimately make the learning environment ideal for multiples who sadly can sometimes be more prone to experiencing difficulties like delayed speech or other language problems. And the school placement issue, as I share in those episodes with John and Pat, it's something that I've experienced myself quite recently. And when I speak to other multiple birth parents, it's something that many worry about. Remembering what I said, though, about the importance of prevention, right? If you want to best prepare your multiples for their school experiences, then I'd highly recommend those episodes with John and Pat. And finally, I had the pleasure of also speaking with Carrie Evans during this season. She's an occupational therapist and is passionate about educating others about sensory processing difficulties that can create problems for children. But with the right support and knowledge, we can greatly alleviate those difficulties. If one or more of your children seem challenging or something with their behavior just doesn't feel quite right, I would highly suggest listening to that episode with Carrie. Carrie taught us that premature baby sensory systems may not be ready for the world. And this can lead to them, feeling overwhelmed easily by the sensations that us parents may not even recognize are a problem for the child. So we as the parents, we might respond with frustration or annoyance because it seems that our child or our children are being, quote unquote, difficult. We know that many multiples are born prematurely and that some do need additional support. So even if your multiples aren't yet earthside, so if you're pregnant and you're listening to this, I'd suggest checking out that episode so that you're armed with more knowledge about sensory processing challenges in case your babies are born prematurely and in case that does become an issue for you. Again, we don't know what we don't know, right? And hindsight is 2020. But I do think, I know for myself, if I had ready access to this information when I was pregnant, I would have soaked it right up. So that brings me to some exciting news that I wanted to share with you about what I have planned for at some point upon my return from Canada. I'll be having a break for 4 weeks, so there won't be any guest interviews released during this time. The podcast will kick off again for season 2 on Wednesday, the 9th of August. I am planning on having a short and sweet solo episode in the second season for you that will be particularly relevant to those of you who are expecting multiples. So please, if you're pregnant or you know anyone else who is, maybe through a multiple birth association or anything like that, please encourage them to have a listen to this podcast. Because what I'd love to do is I'd love to deliver a free workshop for those of you that are pregnant with multiples on what you need to be emotionally prepared for your multiple birth journey. So I have a huge favor to ask you. If this is something that may be of interest to you or anyone else you know, can you get in touch with me? Either by contacting me through Instagram or Facebook, or even if you sign up at my website for my free download. As always, I absolutely love hearing from listeners and finding out what you need, what you want to help you with your multiple birth parenting journey. So please reach out to me. If you're pregnant, you know anyone else who's pregnant, or even if your baby's already born and you think that this is something you would have liked, feel free to reach out to me and let me know what it is that would have helped you. If you're interested in the free workshop, let me know, because that'll help me plan for when to deliver it and, for how long and all of that. So please don't forget, we'll be back for season 2 in early August. I have some amazing speakers lined up for the second half of the year, speaking about interesting topics like the psychology of twins, birth trauma, how to love your body after childbirth, and so much more. So have a great July, and we'll see you back here when we kick off again on the 9th of August. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you've heard, then please follow and leave a review so that other expectant and current parents of multiples like yourself can find this podcast and the valuable information it contains. I'd be so very grateful if you left a review and shared this with anyone you think could benefit from listening. If you have a particular topic you'd like me to cover on this podcast, feel free to reach out to me via my website, fiercekindmama.com. New episodes are released every second Wednesday, so I'll see you back here real soon. Any advice and information in this podcast is general only and has been prepared without taking into account your particular circumstances and needs. For tailored, individualized advice, please consult with a qualified professional.